the Galactic Academy spaceship touched down on the frigid surface of Cora 7 on a clear morning. The planet seemed like an Arctic tundra, with its twin suns casting a pale blue light across an unending horizon. As they reflected light in every direction, towering glaciers glistened like enormous prisms. A howling wind, carrying the threat of unrelenting cold and danger, howled over the tundra. Very few species ventured into this habitat, and even fewer had any chance of making it. It was chosen as the ultimate testing field because of this. Chosen for the Academy's interspecies survival program, Alex Fisher stood out among the 25 recruits not for their extraordinary appearance but for their ordinary demeanor. Alex, being human, stood in for a race that is well known for its adaptability but is still considered to be one of the least powerful in the galaxy. Alex, positioned at the group's periphery, calmly and decisively scanned the landscape. Amidst the rest of the group's nervousness, fidgeting, and gear adjustments, the mission's teacher, Professor Zikra, remained composed. An enormous reptile of the Koran race, his green scales shimmering in the dim light, his piercing yellow eyes betraying his domineering nature. Shra had long been open about his contempt for humans. He was a famous survivalist and a scathing critic of any species he thought were beneath him. He then rose to his feet and spoke to the assembly in a voice that echoed through the air. He started by saying, "Today, looking over the people in the room, Kthos 7 does not tolerate weakness. It does not. Therefore, you will discover the meaning of facing nature's most unforgiving circumstances. You must be able to adapt, innovate, and persevere if you want to survive, therefore reward foolishness. Having said that, you must not be mistaken, you would all perish in this place without the proper equipment." During his speech, Z's eyes landed on Alex, betraying a trace of contempt. He pivoted and motioned toward the participant equipment bags. Survival in such a hostile environment is impossible without the high-tech thermal suits, small shelter modules, and backup heat generators that were included in each pack. Still, Alex's gear seemed incomplete. Embarrassingly simplistic, this Zikra, which is pointed squarely at Alex's little pack, contains little more than a warm jacket, a multi-purpose tool, and a tiny survival knife. It is ludicrous that humans are trying to survive Kthos 7 without sophisticated technology. If this is going to be your final workout, Fisher, you may want to rethink your decisions. Some of the group looked at Alex sympathetically as they giggled uncomfortably. Alex, on the other hand, stood steady beneath Zikra's disdainful stare and said nothing. It is obvious that the professor. People are sensitive and too dependent on feelings and chance, so it is no surprise that they become frustrated when no one responds. The inventiveness of your tools, not your naive bravery or outmoded instincts, will determine your survival today. Alex broke the ice with a measured but forceful statement. Professor, with all due respect, understanding how to utilize what is available and what the environment gives is more important than merely having the equipment you carry, Zakrath said, his tail twitching in displeasure as his nostrils flared. How far will your rudimentary approaches lead you? As soon as the cold touches your sensitive flesh, you will deeply regret being so arrogant, human. The class was excused by the lecturer so that they may begin the activity. The plan was simple. Before midnight, everyone would be dropped off at a separate site within a 10-kilometer radius and given the duty of constructing a shelter. The sun's setting would cause the already dangerously low temperature to plummet even more. It is almost impossible to survive for even 1 hour after dark without proper protection. At the designated spot, Alex got out of the transport van and they could feel the strong animosity of the surroundings the second they arrived at the drop place. Breathing caused thick plumes of ice to be expelled into the cold air. Underfoot, they found a mixture of solid ice and powdered snow that looked like glass. Even in the face of such harsh weather, Alex felt that old rush that came with facing their fears head-on and testing their boundaries in the face of Mother Nature. With years of training on Arctic expeditions and knowledge gained from Inuit elders, Alex was prepared for this moment, having experienced some of the Earth's most harsh conditions. I have researched old methods of building snow shelters in the world of winter survival. Despite its extraterrestrial origins, Cora 7 posed the pinnacle test for these abilities. Alex bent down to feel the snow and saw that it was dry and compact, perfect for making blocks. Far away, he could see other racers releasing their high-tech shelter modules, which fluttered like delicate origami to become insulated domes in an instant. Over the communication gadget, Zick's voice cracked. "Communicator, I hope you are rethinking your own preparedness." "No, Professor. I am only just beginning." The communicator then abruptly turned off as Alex's mocking laughter resounded through it. Alex remained resolute and shook their head. They meticulously started cutting rectangular pieces of snow using their multi-purpose instrument. To build the igloo's foundation, each block was meticulously carved and arranged before joining. Even when wearing gloves, the task demanded concentration and quickness. As the walls grew higher, the cold gnawed at Alex's fingertips, gradually draining their power. Every so often, Alex would stop to make sure the building was steady. The snow blocks, which seemed flimsy, were really rather sturdy. Alex carved a small opening into the rock with their survival knife in order to keep the heat inside. At long last, they fashioned a roof keystone block and skillfully put it into position. The igloo was finished by the time Alex took a step back to evaluate their progress. It was a small but strong building that exuded an air of simplicity. As Alex entered to test the shelter, the whole operation took less than 10 minutes. They turned on a portable emergency heater from their survival box, and the temperature inside started to climb quickly, giving them a welcome reprieve from the icy cold outdoors. Before moving on to the next round of the workout, Alex gave themselves a little time to relax and enjoy themselves. A drone kept an eye on the participants from above, sending real-time video to Zikra and the rest of the Academy personnel, while the professor kept an eye on them. He watched the broadcast in astonishment and annoyance as Alex's igloo withstood the fierce gusts. Under his breath, he said, "Impossible, it must be a fluke." But the storm was still going strong, and Alex's real survival test was just starting. The inhospitable nature of the frozen wasteland intensified during the day on Ctha 7. As the two suns fell below the horizon, the weakening light of the pale blue sun gave way to the foreboding darkness. Already very cold, the temperature started its gradual plunge approaching freezing point. It seemed like every breath was tinged with frosty bits as the air became thicker. Even though Alex Pfizer could feel the air becoming colder, they kept their focus and altered their thermal gear accordingly. The seemingly unending expanse of snow and ice stretched out before them, broken only here and then by the sharp peaks of glaciers. Miles away, the other players were busy activating their high-tech shelters. Fragments of the professor's ideas flowed through the communication gadget in Alex's ear, which made a soft buzzing sound. Professor Z's voice, which was full of conviction on the need of progress, was a mix of reverence for modern technology and scornful comments about antiquated ways. No sentient being, no matter how clever, could hope to make it through Ctha 7 without access to better engineering. Alex allowed themselves a little grin and decided not to interact. They had relied on time-tested methods passed down from Earth to construct the igloo in just 10 minutes, rather than cutting-edge technology. It was unmoved. As a monument to human ingenuity, it stands sturdy against the piercing wind, with its curving walls and interconnected snow blocks. They started getting ready for the approaching storm while Alex checked their efforts. Even the wind's subtle whistling had begun to change in volume and irregularity. Earlier, the snowflakes were little and hardly noticeable, but now they were swirling with more and more intensity, giving the first indications of a blizzard. Everything in Alex's gut told him that something bad was about to happen. They knelt in the snow and took out their multi-tool. Alex used the tool to strengthen the igloo walls by filling any gaps with snow and smoothing off any rough spots so the wind would not hit them as hard. The top air vent had been painstakingly carved, and the inside thermal bulb gave off a gentle light. A faraway rumble, borne by the wind over the ice plains, interrupted Alex's concentration. The sound was clearly that of a storm gaining momentum, rather than an animal's roar. As the sound was followed by little sensations under their feet, Alex froze, listening carefully. This was no typical storm, it served as a stark reminder of Earth's brutal truths. It has the potential to destroy even the most sturdy buildings and engulf whole expeditions in an invisible cloud. Participants, prepare for extreme weather conditions. Wind speeds are increasing beyond predicted levels. Ensure your shelters are secure. Alex imagines Ra's smug expression, likely anticipating their failure, but failure was not an option. The communication device in Alex's hand crackled again, its message carrying an air of urgency. Alex stood up and took stock of his environment. Snow was falling fast around the igloo's base and may block the tiny entry tube. Quickly, Alex shoveled away the snow and used it to fortify the walls. In an effort to save energy in the face of the precipitous temperature decline, every step was measured and planned. The sky became a disturbing gray-blue, almost unnatural tint of darkening. A few moments later, the storm hit with an abrupt vengeance. The winds howled wildly, bringing with them thick layers of snow and ice. Layers of thermal protection seemed insufficient as the temperature plummeted and visibility plummeted, slamming into Alex's bare flesh. With a cautious placement of a snow block, Alex dove inside the igloo, closing the opening. The indoors was filled with the hushed, foreboding sound of the storm. The building maintained its clever layout, which helped to distribute the snowfall and divert the unrelenting wind. While resting their legs on the compacted snow, Alex sat cross-legged and took a deep breath. In contrast to the mayhem outside, the thermal lamp's soothing hum and warm round glow provided a welcome respite. Alex refueled by eating a high-energy bar and taking a ration pack out of their rucksack. A strategic move toward survival underpinned every choice in action. The situation was less steady in other parts of the world. Other participants' urgent reports filled the comm channel. A voice said, "The integrity of my shelter is collapsing," before static filled the air. A second voice joined in, filled with dread as the gust of wind severed a section of the "I cannot keep my balance, dome. Your commanding voice has cut through the din, Professor Zygra. It is imperative that you promptly activate emergency measures and send out more forces." Even the most cutting-edge equipment was struggling to withstand the tremendous power of the storm, and Alex could not help but think of the professor's reaction. In those instants, the value of a minimalist design informed more by practical considerations than by aesthetic preferences became crystal clear. Built entirely out of snow and human resourcefulness, Alex's igloo withstood the onslaught of the tempest. There was no sign of relief from the storm as it continued to roar for hours. Even though it was still comfortable inside the igloo, Alex knew he had to be on guard. They made sure the air vent was clear of snow by checking on it every so often. Their hands were becoming tight from the cold even with the gloves on, but they kept going since they knew that movement was key to keeping circulation going. The outside was being pounded by a wind that howled like a beast. A new crackling noise emanated from the connection device, and this time it was. Regardless of the situation, Professor Zekra spoke directly to Alex, asking, "This is Professor Zekra. What is your status?" while Alex continued to touch the gadget. "The shelter is holding, the temperature is consistent, and there are no difficulties to report," the professor said, pausing as if to ponder the answer. "Oh, I see. I thought your unique strategy would backfire by now." Alex leaned back against the igloo wall, a tiny grin playing on his lips. "The storm has not yet passed, Professor. We must wait and see whether everything remains intact." The professor's reply was abrupt, The blizzard continued throughout the night, and Alex remained on high alert, using their multi-tool to remove loose snow and pack it into weak spots within the igloo at regular intervals. The shelter, little as it was, proved to be more resilient than the exposed domes and angular structures that the other competitors had used, because to its compact form. Alex was starting to show signs of tiredness after being up for over 20 hours throughout the storm's subsidence. A feeling of victory was instilled when the first rays of dawn peered through the storm clouds. As Alex stepped out of the igloo, he took stock of the scene before him. The once pristine plains were now a jumble of broken ice and snowdrifts. People gathered in survival pods near the wreckage of many high-tech shelters. After what seemed like an eternity, Professor Zick finally spoke. "Pfizer, report to the meeting location. The exercise is over." As Alex dusted snow from their jacket, they cast a glimpse back at the igloo. Unharmed, a silent representation of strength and flexibility, they set off on foot in a methodical fashion toward the prearranged gathering spot. As the first faint rays of dawn peered through the storm clouds of Cora 7, the storm's reverberations gradually subsided. The landscape was a visual representation of the devastation caused by the storm. What were once smooth glacial fields were now a jumble of snowdrifts and ice fragments, a clear indication of the planet's relentless brutality. Compared to the hours leading up to this moment, the air, which was still cold and stinging, seemed almost serene. A mix of relief and exhaustion washed over Alex Pfizer as he emerged from the igloo, having endured a protracted struggle of roaring winds and blinding snow. Now that the storm had passed, the real struggle for survival could begin. In stark contrast to the scattered wreckage on the horizon, the igloo's spherical shape remained fixed behind Alex. Many technologically sophisticated shelters, which were formerly lauded as engineering marvels, were reduced to rubble when the relentless assault of the storm destroyed them. A number of people had congregated. They were only able to survive by donning thermal suits, and emergency distress signals had been triggered near the ruins of their shelters. Some had withdrawn within their survival pods, their once self-assured personalities distorted by an overwhelming sense of dread and helplessness. A shrill and commanding voice, Professor Zek Rath's, pierced the air as Professor Zek's communication gadget came to life. "Please be advised to meet at the specified location at the earliest convenience. If you want any assistance, please do not hesitate to ask." Alex detected a subtle trace of unease in the professor's voice. The outcomes of the exercise clearly fell short of his expectations, but he skillfully masked it with his customary dominant demeanor. The non-traditional method had not only survived the tests, but it seemed to have outperformed Zikra's ardently promoted technology. Alex started walking toward the meeting spot once they gathered their belongings. Due to the thick and hazardous snow, every step was difficult. The snow had melted, leaving the frozen ground below very slippery. A slip or fall may result in serious injury. Their thoughts were racing over what had happened in the previous hours, but Alex continued on quietly determined. Survival was more of a test of fortitude, flexibility, and awareness of one's surroundings than it was of technological prowess or physical prowess. Every choice and modification to the igloo had been pivotal. The magnitude of the exercise's consequences became apparent as Alex drew near the meeting spot. After having their bunkers destroyed, small groups of people gathered near rescue drones. Shattering panels and exposed wires have eroded the once immaculate faith in their advanced equipment to ineffectiveness. A number of extraterrestrials were having passionate arguments with Academy employees, and Alex could see them making dramatic gestures and shouting their frustrations. Their faith in the technology they had relied on had been shattered by the equipment's breakdown. Standing tall and proud among the chaos, Zikra's emerald scales shimmered as he commanded attention with his formidable reptile presence. With an attitude that was hard to decipher, partially annoyance and contemplation, his piercing yellow eyes examined the participants faintly in the poor light. He looked at Alex for a little longer than was really required when his eyes met hers. Nearing the gathering, Alex could almost feel the weight of the professor's verdict. Everything that Zra had said about technology being better was directly contradicted by the fact that the Igloo had lasted while using relatively little resources. It was more than just a personal achievement for Alex. Triumph is a good reminder that people tend to undervalue their own ingenuity, which is impossible for computers to imitate. As everyone else gathered, the professor held out a clawed hand to signify hush. A hint of annoyance was there in his controlled voice. The storm may have gone, but it certainly brought to light some serious problems with your methods. Even though it is very effective, modern technology is not perfect. Those who put their faith in it blindly without researching the ecosystem suffered the consequences. Only a low murmur accompanied his statements. With some nodding in agreement and others remaining silent, Zra shifted her focus squarely onto Alex, his intense stare slightly narrowing. With a composed but determined look on their faces, Fisher and Alex both moved forward. Curiosity washed across the assembled people, who shifted their gaze to observe. Many had heard tales of Alex's unusual storm shelter but had not yet seen its impact themselves. Towards the horizon, Zikra extended her hand. "Well, I am glad to hear that your shelter made it through the storm unscathed," Alex said with a level head. "It stands tall and works well." The professor's expression was one of possible respect, but his tone was one of skepticism. The professor's tail twitched subtly as a sign of agitation, but Alex calmly continued, "I constructed an igloo out of compacted snow blocks. Its shape distributes wind pressure and acts as insulation. This is a strategy that people have employed for generations in harsh climates." During the storm, Alex fortified the walls and made sure the air vent was clear to allow for adequate ventilation. Used simple methods despite others having access to advanced shelter modules, yet you managed to succeed while others failed. Where can you even begin to describe this? Without hesitating, Alex locked eyes with him. To survive, it is not enough to have access to appropriate tools. What really matters is how you put those things to use. Structure and flexibility were the primary concerns of the storm, rather than technology. The igloo was well suited to its surroundings, which is why it worked so well. Progression is not always indicative of dominance. In response to the whispers among, Zek's face stiffened, but he was slow to speak. As their shock and interest grew, the other participants spoke out more and more. Although many had before written off Alex's method as theoretically unrealistic and out of date, the outcomes were indisputable. Zik eventually said after a long gap, his tone begrudging, "Your unconventional technique may have some validity, but it does not absolve you of the dangers you incurred by re-engineering conventional machinery." Alex nodded slightly, seeing the point but maintaining their resolve. "Regarding your point, Professor, depending on malfunctioning machinery would have posed the biggest threat. Triumph over adversity." Some of the participants seemed to approve of the reaction, however Zikra's annoyance was obvious. He then shifted his attention to the assembled assembly. This exercise was not just a survival test, it was a demonstration of resourcefulness. Some of you succeeded, while others did not. Let this serve as a lesson. Adaptability and understanding your environment are as important as the tools you bring. His gaze swept over the group before returning to Alex. "Pfizer, we will take note of your performance today. Even if I disagree with your techniques, I cannot deny that they work." Even though Alex was hesitant to grin, he nodded anyway, and the gang was good to go as they were about to leave Cora 7. Finally, Alex cast a final look back at their igloo, which stood resolutely against the frozen landscape. In the face of insurmountable obstacles, it stood as a symbol of strength and the need of keeping things simple. Survival was not about showing who was better, but rather about adjusting to new circumstances. This was the lesson that Alex took away from the experience. Indeed, Cora 7 had achieved this, and her influence on the Galactic Academy's understanding of endurance had been profound. The group's anger was almost palpable when they boarded the shuttle to leave Kva-7. Many people were still uneasy after the storm, having their faith in technology and maybe even in themselves severely shaken. As it rose from the planet's surface, the shuttle hummed gently, its thermal shielding warding off the severe cold. Fisher, Alex sat. Remaining silently at a window, they watched as the frigid expanse of Kva-7 melted away under them, a sobering reminder of the strenuous workout they had just finished. The triumph was bittersweet for Alex since it meant that their improvised shelter, the Igloo, had shown its worth. A more serious worry, however, was brought to light by the event: the careless reliance on technology in the absence of a firm understanding of survival basics. While the storm was going on, Alex could not help but think about how they had received distress calls from other participants, many of whom had trouble keeping their sophisticated shelters up and running. Consistent with the precarious condition of the domes, trust in advanced equipment is eroding. As he addressed the gathering of participants, Professor Z's commanding voice shattered the stillness inside the shuttle. "I hope you have gained some useful knowledge from this exercise. Being alive on Cora 7 was more than just a physical challenge, it was a test of your ability to think critically in harsh environments. Some of you made it, but many of you didn't." His yellow eyes glanced around the room, briefly settling on Alex before he continued. "When you go to the academy, you are all going to get a comprehensive evaluation of your work. Both your individual assessments and the guidelines for future training will be based on the data gathered throughout the exercise." The instructor maintained a calm demeanor, but his words betrayed a hint of frustration, a covert admission that the exercise's outcomes did not meet his expectations. The other participants looked at each other nervously, their faces showing a mixture of satisfaction at making it through the ordeal and anxiety about the next assessments. Alex maintained composure, their self-assurance strengthened by the indisputable. Upon docking with the Galactic Academy orbiting station, it became clear that their approach had been successful. In a systematic manner, the participants disembarked and were each led to a separate debriefing room. Professor Zra stood with two other professors at either side of a stark, minimalist room, and Alex's turn came swiftly after that. Data and photos from the exercise were projected onto a giant holographic display that took up one wall. Professor Zra started, his voice sharp but not harsh. As the professor turned on the screen, Alex nodded and sat down, maintaining a casual yet alert stance. Data points showing the position and performance of each participant were superimposed on top of a comprehensive map of Cora 7 on the holographic display. The blue-lit igloo belonging to Alex was the focus of the close-up. Zikra pointed to the projection and said, "This is your shelter. A simple igloo made of compacted snow. It does not have any fancy materials or systems, but it survived the storm when all the other tech shelters failed." Alex leaned in close, carefully selecting their words to describe the igloo's effectiveness. In very windy situations, the design's ability to evenly disperse pressure is crucial. It does not need any outside power sources to keep warm since its small walls insulate against cold. Some of the harshest locations on Earth have used this method for generations. Because it is not dependent on complex systems, which may fail, the structure's simplicity is its greatest strength. Zikra gave Alex a long look and then nodded slowly. "Indeed, you are quite right, your straightforward strategy really worked here. But ease of use is no assurance of achievement. Instead of using the given conventional equipment, why did you choose this method?" Without hesitating, Alex locked eyes with him. "I was prepared for the fact that Kva-7's atmosphere would put any shelter to the test. Though effective, the standard equipment relies on presumptions on storm length, temperature thresholds, and wind speeds when it is developed. Because of my prior experience training in similar settings, I had faith in the Igloo's efficacy. Rejecting technology was not the point. We spoke about how important it is to use the right tools for the right jobs. With emotions that were difficult to decipher, The other teachers looked at each other. A moment of thought was conveyed by the flip of Z's tail. He said, "Your argument is good," but his tone betrayed his uncertainty. The exercise was more than simply building a shelter. It was a test of resilience, adaptation, and collaboration. Your shelter not only survived, but flourished. Alex arched an eyebrow in surprise. Collaboration? We were purposefully kept apart during the whole exercise, Zick said, his brow furrowing. Taking a somewhat more forward stance, the conversation revolved on dealing with solitude and solving difficulties without outside help, which reflects one's capacity to perform well in a team setting when time is of the essence. Although you achieved great success, Fisher, you did it all by yourself. Were you not thinking about asking for help from other players? Alex was taken aback by the question. They thought back on the cries for help they had heard during the storm and waited for a minute. With a controlled tone, Alex confessed, "I thought about it, but I could not risk leaving my refuge. My life is in danger, and I could not have helped anybody else if I could not have protected myself." After giving Alex a lengthy look, Shroff finally nodded to show that she agreed. Collaboration is often the deciding factor in real-world situations, as opposed to controlled exercises where survival is the only objective. Remember that. The next part of the debriefing included an analysis of Alex's performance, outlining his strong points and places where he might need some work. As the holographic screen changed, it showed the shelters of other contestants crumbling. After Alex's cool, collected demeanor at the session's end, the storm and their frenzied efforts to fix or strengthen the structures stood in sharp contrast. Zikra rose to her feet, indicating that the discussion had come to a close. "You have surpassed all expectations, Pfizer. Your methods will be included into the survival training curriculum of the Academy." Alex stood up, nodded slightly in gratitude, and then left the room. Re-entering the hallway, they were overcome with a sense of fulfillment. It was more than just about. The fundamental idea of proving Zra incorrect was to highlight the worth of human resourcefulness and perseverance in a universe that often disregarded their talents. Within a few days, word of Alex's achievement had spread around the school. After first ignoring the human approaches, several participants started to treat them with reverence and interest. Openly sharing their experiences, Alex emphasized that being the strongest or most evolved was not the only factor in surviving, but rather comprehending and responding to the environment's obstacles. Whereas, Professor Zikra held a position of power while also being the subject of heated debate. Despite his praise for Alex's achievements, he was already planning the next round of the survival exercise, hell-bent on finding the sweet spot where technology and flexibility might work together. Cthulhu 7 was more than just a test, it confirmed their beliefs in all they had learned. Even in a galaxy where new technologies and ideas are the norm, the lessons of history and the resilience of the human spirit have a place. Improving processes and developing long-term strategies were still top priorities as they planned forward. As far as Alex could tell, their adventure at the Galactic Academy had only just begun. A combination of contemplation, joy, and recentering characterized the days that followed the Cthulhu 7 exercise. Previously scattered over the frozen wasteland, participants gathered in common areas at the Galactic Academy to exchange stories of survival and the lessons they had learned from nature's unforgiving might. In spite of the group's strong sense of solidarity, Alex Fisher's story stood out. It was a tale of rebellion against accepted knowledge. Alex's return to the Academy was a mix of emotions. On one hand, they were elated by the success of their Igloo and Professor Zara's recognition. On the other hand, they were troubled by the larger questions that their victory had raised. Why had everyone been so reliant on technology? Had their peers' instincts been dulled by their blind faith in advanced systems? And most importantly, could their achievement spark a broader change in the way survival training was approached? These questions lingered as they navigated their way back to the Academy. Al got ready for the exercise's last part, which was a public assessment and debrief in the Academy's main hall. As a formal farewell to the Academy's main exercises, this event also acted as a teaching tool. As they crowded into the hall, students, teachers, and Academy officials stared at the colossal holographic displays that took up most of the space. The results, both good and bad, of each participant would be laid bare for everyone to see. The atmosphere hummed with expectation as, at the beginning of the session, Professor Zikra and a group of senior lecturers took the stage. He was so dominant that everyone fell silent at his mention. Keeping an objective and intellectual tone, he began by providing a brief summary of the activity. The purpose of the Cora 7 survival exercise was to test participants' abilities to adapt, be creative, and persevere under harsh circumstances. Everyone had their own unique set of problems, and their answers have given us invaluable information to help us improve our teaching methods. Screen showing workout video came on as he talked. Shelters crumbling, people scrambling to fix them, and acts of genius were all shown in great clarity. As they saw the contestants' diverse efforts to weather the storm, the crowd gasped and whispered in response. Quietness descended over the room as the camera panned down on Alex's igloo. Ahead of a looming storm, the display showed Alex meticulously building the shelter out of compressed snow blocks. There was a striking contrast between the building's simplicity and the surrounding high-tech environment. Domes that failed under identical circumstances. With a brief pause, Professor Zira surveyed the crowd, and suddenly Pfizer appeared. The air was thick with murmuring as the professor's comments lingered. He pointed to the televisions, where the clip of the igloo weathering the storm was still playing. This, Zikra added, is a tribute to the power of an in-depth knowledge of one's surroundings. Fisher's unusual method worked where sophisticated systems failed. It is a shining example of the. As Alex sat among the other participants, he could feel the weight of every stare. The power of knowledge, inventiveness, and flexibility was tangible. As they observed, some felt awe, others wondered, and a small number of them exhibited a hint of doubt. The moment when Z finally admitted it, however reluctantly, was a watershed point in the discussion of survival training generally and for Alex in particular. The professor looked straight at Alex and invited them to come up on stage with him. Bracing themselves for action, Alex stood up and strode forward to the front. With the holographic displays softly lighting the stage, Hall and Zikra faced the spectators. Fisher's Ra, he remarked with an authoritative but respectful tone, "You have shown that your method questions the status quo. Tell us what you think about the factors that influenced your actions on Kfa 7. Alex paused to collect his thoughts before answering. The storm on Cora 7 did not prove that having technology is essential to survival. What really matters is how you put it to use. I did not dismiss technology, rather, I focused on building an igloo that could withstand the harsh conditions of its intended environment." The audience nodded and murmured in agreement as Zira looked thoughtfully at Alex before turning to address the crowd. The lesson he conveyed with his strong voice is one that we should all remember. In our relentless quest for advancement, we must not let ourselves be held back. The basics of being successful serve as a reminder that innovation involves both the creation of new tools and the rethinking of old ones. As the session went on, other participants were evaluated, but the focus was always on what Alex's accomplishment meant for the bigger picture. Many students and teachers had concerns about the current state of survival training and wanted to know how it might be improved to better include both basic and advanced technological knowledge. Alex saw this as the real triumph, not only making it through the storm, but starting a conversation that may result in significant progress. The Academy's strategy changed in the days that followed when Alex became an inspiration and a source of interest. Alex was sought after by his other pupils who were interested in learning more about the methods used. Workshops on practical survival techniques were organized by instructors who saw Alex's talent and encouraged him to conduct them. Alex expertly combined modern ideas with old Earth practices. While ZTH still kept his distance and pride in his teachings, he did start to borrow certain ideas from Alex's method. As Alex strolled through the Academy's garden one evening, a rare patch of vegetation on board the orbiting facility, the air was thick with hope and possibility for the future. The professor, Zira, was waiting for them at the station. As if absorbed in deep contemplation, his towering stature was subdued by the serene surroundings. Turning to face them, he turned to say, "Fisher, you have given me much to think about." Alex offered a small grin in response. "I hope it is a good thing," Professor Zekra said, his voice seeming almost contorted as he giggled. "I was mistaken to disregard your techniques. You have shown me that adaptation, not dominance, is the key to survival. Not even the most sophisticated systems can ignore the conditions they were built to work in." The confession was weighty. Even if it was subtle, Alex could not turn a blind eye to its significance. As their appreciation for the professor grew, they nodded in his honor. "I appreciate that, Professor, but I believe we have both gained knowledge from this," Zekra said, nodding in accord as he walked away. As the school got back to its regular schedule, Alex felt a mix of relief and hope as she watched him go. The effects of Corey the Seven's teachings were far-reaching. Not only was Alex's victory a personal triumph, but it also served as a catalyst for change and a reminder that change is frequently necessary for growth. Alex realized that the path was never ending as he reflected on both his past and his future. Knowing that their efforts had made a big difference, they felt re-energized and ready to take on the future.